Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, we answer a couple questions from listeners, and that's what we're going to get into. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it a Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. I'm Vince Samperio, Chavez Ring Fiends, rolling solo dolo for the night, or for the day, actually, for today's episode. We're here to talk about the Dodgers. We had a couple questions/comments from listeners based on some of our previous episodes. So I wanted to get in and address some of those things. But before we get into that, I just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. We are free and available on all platforms and on YouTube. And we're here every Monday through Friday. So join us. All right, so let's just hop right into it. No real news over the weekend. The two sides are expected to meet soon. The players are supposed to bring their counter proposal, and then I'm hoping and imagining that will kickstart the negotiations a little bit, that they'll realize, hey, it's almost February and we have no deal, and the players are supposed to report in 2 weeks. And we don't want to miss time, because missing time equals missing money and revenue, and we don't want to do that. So let's get started. So I'm hoping that's what happens. That remains to be seen, but regardless, that's what we're gonna do. So we'll see what happens on that front. But let's get into one of the questions/comments. This one I got in my DMs from at Big Pa Luca. He says, we'll get pitching from somewhere, somehow. Let's talk about what really let us down last year. Not arms, bats, and defense. Why in the heck are we still talking about Correa or Story? Stop it. As far as I'm concerned, we already upgraded at shortstop. Give the man some love, Dodger fans. And if we don't trade Lutz, he's going to have a real good year at second base. Trust. All right, Luca, not that we don't trust you, but you're saying let's talk about what let the Dodgers down last year, bats and defense. And then you go on to say that you don't want one of the best defensive players at shortstop in Carlos Correa. And I can understand people's concerns with Correa. I feel like we've brought it up a little bit more recently. I still wouldn't say it's anything more than a pie in the sky shot right now for the Dodgers. But at the end of the day, he upgrades the team defensively. Trey Turner is actually pretty solid defensively at shortstop, but Carlos Correa is better and has been better by a few metrics in the past few years. And what you're telling me when you say we haven't talked about Story, so I don't know who talked about Story. We haven't ever really given Trevor Story any real thought as a Dodger. But either way, what you're telling me is that last year bats and defense let us down. You shoot down a better defensive player at shortstop, and then you say that the combination of Trey Turner and Gavin Lux would be better offensively than the combination of Corey Seager and Trey Turner, which, simply is not true by any standards of what we know right now. Could it possibly be true? Yeah, for a couple reasons. Seager might get hurt again, and then obviously just based on sheer volume play, if Lux and Turner didn't get hurt, then yes, they would theoretically be better. But you're counting on Gavin Lux to be better offensively than Corey Seager in that sense, and I don't know if that will ever happen, and especially not next year. But Yeah, if you're going to complain about the bats letting us down, and then you're going to say that Gavin Lux and Trey Turner is better than Trey Turner and Corey Seager, I don't necessarily agree with you. I know what you're saying in the fact of Lux could have a good year at second base. That's very possible, but he doesn't necessarily upgrade you offensively. They are right now, as it stands, downgraded offensively as a whole. Now, where they can make that up is yes, Lux having a good year if he doesn't get traded at second base. Chris Taylor continuing his strong play, AJ Pollock continuing his strong play, and then you get a bounce back year from Cody Bellinger. And that's where you make up the difference from Corey Seager's departure offensively. If Cody Bellinger has even a year like in between his rookie year and MVP year, even if he has a 2018 year, that's still an upgrade from the Bellinger they got last year. Not necessarily a full upgrade to MVP Bellinger, but you take what you can get at this point. And a matter of we'll get pitching from somewhere somehow. Yes, I do agree with that. But as it stands right now, if we're talking about the Dodgers in this current state, the concerns are with pitching. They don't have 5 starting pitchers right now, or they don't have 5 guys that would be counted on to go every 5th day for 5-6 innings at this point. They have Julio and they have Walker at the top of the rotation. They have Andrew Heaney in the middle of the rotation, and then the back end of the rotation, which we'll get into a little bit later too, is a handful of guys. Now, obviously, they can add to that with Kershaw, but Kershaw adds more to the middle rotation at this point than the top of the rotation, and it just depends what kind of rotation you're trying to build. So, if the concern is why we've been talking about pitching so much, it's because the Dodgers do need pitching theoretically on this roster right now. They need starting pitching. They don't necessarily need offense. They're not probably ever going to look to add someone for defensive value only. I would imagine they would look to add defensive value with offensive value, but never defensive value only. So in terms of the concern addressed, if you're going to complain about defense and hitting, then the loss of Corey Seager weakens you offensively. The addition of Carlos Correa would strengthen you defensively. So that's why those have been mentioned. But I do agree with, Trey Turner being a very good shortstop option. And then it just depends on what happens at second base, who plays there, who plays the majority. We've talked about Freddie Freeman a lot. That moves Max Muncy second base. Don't know if that necessarily upgrades you defensively all around, although Max Muncy did end up playing a pretty solid second base before he became full-time first baseman. So very possible. But that's what we got there. Going to come back, going to talk about the rotation, going to talk about a specific guy in the rotation or someone we haven't mentioned much this year. But first, let's talk about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar. And the first month, January, is nearly gone. And, maybe you didn't quite stick to the New Year's resolutions you made, or maybe you did. But if you need help continuing to stick to them or need help in getting back on track to stick with them, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar that can help you out. They got low calories, low sugar, low carbs, high protein, high fiber, all covered in chocolate, a bunch of different flavors. They got everything you need in order to be kind of your daily go-to protein bar, your daily go-to snack, your daily go-to dessert, whatever the case, whatever you need, Built Bar is there for you. And right now, if you go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCK15, you'll get 15% off your order. So go to Built.com, promo code LOCK15, get 15% off, and go get you some Built Bars. All right. Now, we're going to talk about one specific guy that was not mentioned when we were talking about starting rotation. And our listener, Billy Martinez, hit us up on Instagram and asked about Tony Gonsolin, saying we didn't mention him. Was it an oversight, or what can we expect from Gonsolin in 2022? And not mentioning him may have been an oversight in general. I guess I'm just down on Gonsolin after what we saw last year, which may be unfair to him, but that's just the fact of the matter of how he looked last year and what I think he can contribute. I don't necessarily, at this point, I don't consider him an option for a starting rotation role. And that very might change. He did make 13 starts last year, had a 3.23 ERA, didn't throw that many innings per start as we know, but I mean, in 35 games in the big leagues, 27 of those being starts, Tony Gonsolin has a 2.85 ERA. There's that's good. And probably somebody that should be getting more consideration, at least on our end, and should be getting his name dropped a little more consistently on our end. I do think that just the way things went last year, I don't know. I guess like I said, I didn't think of him as highly, but he does have the numbers. He will theoretically be stretched out by that point because he will have the whole offseason after suffering injury last year, and he should be, better and ready to go. I do think he is a guy that the Dodgers, I don't know if they're counting on, but I definitely think right now, as it sits, let's just say if you had to build a Dodger rotation, I do think it's Walker, Julio, Heaney. Honestly, Gonsolin might be in that fourth slot. And then you got, David Price, Pepio, Andre Jackson, Mitch White, everybody else in that fifth spot. So, yeah, as it sits right now, just based on the past and health, Tony Gonsolin probably sits in that rotation. And like I said, so probably somebody we should have talked about. But I do think it was a little telling that both of us, didn't mention him, whether it's we both had an oversight or whether we both don't believe in him. But I just don't see him as being a rotation guy this year. I kind of see him more in a Ross Stripling role where he's making spot starts and being that long reliever out of the pen or wherever they need him. I do think they might, build him up backwards where he might not necessarily be built out as a starter to start. He will, work his way into roles. Maybe start off in some 2-inning stints and then go up from there. And then by the time the middle of the season comes, he'll be ready to be in that starting rotation. So, yeah, and I think, we probably discredited him a little bit. And I do think he's a guy that can very well be in that starting rotation, very well be a guy that goes every fifth day and gives you 5-6 innings. And a guy that could probably pitch better than some of the names we've been mentioning. Some of the guys, we've mentioned Zach Greinke a couple times here on the podcast. And, I would imagine that Tony Gonsolin, stretched out and healthy over the course of a season, would be able to pitch better than Zach Greinke. And I do agree with that. And he's a guy who, like I said, last year his numbers weren't terrible, but he outperformed his FIP. His ERA was outperformed his FIP by over a run. His WHIP was 1.3. He was allowing more home runs. He was striking out more, but also walking a lot more. And he just, like I said, never gave you that confidence last year that you had in him, at least in 2020. Obviously, 2020 postseason, that confidence wavered a little bit as well. But, yeah, he's definitely a guy. I guess the other reason that maybe not mentioned is we're not necessarily sold on him still being here by the time the season starts. It depends on who you're trading with or who you're dealing with. But if you do make a trade for a starting pitcher or something else, depends where that team is in their development. Do they want major league ready guys or do they want, more future? But if it's a team that wants a little bit more major league ready guys, if the Reds or say, hey, we want a couple major league ready guys, and you can see a package of Gavin Lux and Tony Gonsolin being those guys because they're not, they're expendable to a certain extent. Maybe Gonsolin a little bit more than Lux in terms of being part of the Dodgers in 2022, but he's also a guy that is ready-made to be a starter already. You can add him to your rotation, and on a bad team, he could be a 3-4 starter. On a good team like the Dodgers, he's a 4-5 starter. And, he slots right into your rotation from day one, and there you go. You got a guy that will be under team control for a few years, should theoretically be pretty good, and should, give value to your team. So I think a combination of those few factors is why we didn't mention Tony Gonsolin. And, I do apologize to him. I'm sure he's not listening, but I do apologize to him for us not mentioning him. But I do think there's a lot of factors, and I personally don't see him unless they don't get anybody else in the offseason and they go with the approach that I mentioned before, where you go with starters, you hope your offense is good, and then around the deadline or June, July, you're looking for who that starting pitcher is going to be that's going to help you in the second half of the season. And if that's the case, then yeah, Tony Gonsolin's your number 4 or 5 starter right now, and you're handing him the ball every fifth day, and that's very possible, and he could thrive in that role. I do think he would thrive better in the Ross Stripling role, which is a little bit unfair to him because it was unfair to Ross Stripling at the time as well, because they had pitched well enough to earn a spot in a rotation, but that was just the name of the game, the nature of the beast, the nature of being on the Dodgers. And as of right now, that nature isn't there. They don't have 5 quality starting pitchers. He would be in that theoretical 5 quality starting pitchers at this point for a starting rotation. So Tony Gonsolin could very well be a factor. I hope that whatever happened last year was just a matter of him being injured and not quite getting it and feeling it and not quite being back. And this year he thrives in whatever role he's in. And that would, make me nothing but happy to see him do that. So that's where we're at on Tony Gonsolin. I would imagine that he's going to be a guy that contributes in 2022 in whatever role it is, whether it's with the Dodgers or whether it's in getting the Dodgers a player that will help the Dodgers in 2022. So that's where Gonsolin's at. Let's see what he does this year. Obviously, we don't have any updates. We would imagine that everybody's healthy and that everybody's tracking well for what should be the start of spring training here in 3 weeks, although it doesn't seem that it's going to start in 3 weeks. So either way, remains to be seen. But that's where we're at on Tony Gonsolin. And going to come back, going to talk a little bit about Freddie Freeman from a Ken Rosenthal article that came out, and just, keeping that thing alive, and how it maybe looks like the Dodgers are a little bit closer than we think about Freddie Freeman in this day and age. So let's talk about BetOnline first. BetOnline wants to wish you a happy new betting year as the football playoffs roll on. Basketball and hockey are getting ready for the playoff runs, and there's just a bunch of other sports going on. So BetOnline remains your number one spot for all those sports and all the sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year. They've got a new website, and right now you can sign up and get a 50% welcome bonus when you head to BetOnline and you use the promo code LOCKEDON. So go sign up at BetOnline, use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available right now. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Just want to quickly thank you, remind you, and help spread the word that make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. We are free, and we can be found wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. Depends if you want to just hear us, depends if you want to see us. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at every single weekday, Monday through Friday. So check us out, find us out, tell your friends, do all those good things. Now let's talk a little bit about Freddie Freeman. Ken Rosenthal came out with an article that basically said that once the lockout ends, it's not necessarily a guarantee that Freddie Freeman goes back to the Braves. And we've been thinking about this as Dodger fans, because obviously Freddie Freeman would look great in Dodger blue, and how realistic it was didn't seem too realistic. It's a matter of, it's like anybody with Kershaw. Does anybody really think Kershaw's going to leave? No. Do any Braves fans or people really think Freddie Freeman's going to leave the Braves? No. But this article that Rosenthal laid out makes it seem a little more intriguing to the fact that he might not re-sign with the Braves. He mentioned that they weren't able to find out. They weren't able to get the extension done in the spring, in the summer, or even with the lockout looming in November. It still could work out, but that the Braves had already started checking out some backup plans, that they had some talks for first baseman Matt Olson from the A's that they talked about before the lockout. Matt Olson is younger, somebody we have talked about here for the Dodgers to potentially trade for, along with starting pitcher from the A's, if that's the route they want to go. But, the fact that the Braves, even obviously every team is going to have conversations about anybody. The Dodgers, probably have conversations about outfielders, even though they don't necessarily need outfielder. They probably have conversations about shortstop, even though they don't necessarily need shortstop for this year. But regardless of all that, it is a little bit telling that they did have that conversation that is being leaked out. However, it's being leaked out. I'm not sure, who benefits from leaking that. It certainly doesn't benefit the Braves to leak that out, because if they're trying to bring back Freddie Freeman, but whatever the case, I don't think the Braves want to do that. Obviously, if you can sign Freddie Freeman, it only costs you money. If you have to trade from that, all of a sudden it's going to cost you prospects, who the Braves have kind of fell off in prospects the last few years based on trades and based on guys graduating to the big leagues. So Freddie Freeman, does he come to the Dodgers? I still, I still don't see it being more than like a 30% chance, and even that's maybe a little bit high on the percentage wise. But if the Braves play around, or if a lot of stuff happens right when the lockout ends, and whatever the case is, and Freddie Freeman ends up signing with the Dodgers, I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be shocked. I might be a little surprised. But either way, this guy, he fits the team, he fits the role. Like I said, some people might have to move around, aka Max Muncy moving to second base, which I don't think he would have an issue with, or universal DH comes, and you got Max Muncy and maybe Justin Turner sharing some time there for the universal DH, and the Dodgers would be set, and it just kind of moves everybody down a notch. It makes Gavin Lux more of a utility guy. It keeps Chris Taylor as a utility guy. Gives you insurance in case AJ Pollock isn't good this year and you need to play Taylor in left field. Gives you insurance in case Cody Bellinger doesn't recover and doesn't play well this year, in case you need to, bench him in certain situations or make him a platoon type player. It just, helps you in a few different regards. He won't come as highly priced as some of these other young stars, or as Seager was, as Correa would be, as even maybe some of these other guys. He'd be a little bit cheaper. And a guy that, like I said, just fits and adds that big thump to the middle of the lineup, which, not that they've been lacking, but it would just, be a different type and a more consistent type. If you see it as swapping Seager for Freddie Freeman, Seager's, right up there. But Freddie Freeman was an MVP in 2020. Freddie Freeman has been a guy that's been in the lineup, day in and day out for a while, and a guy that really, not only adds to the team on the field, but would add to the team off the field, and would be a bona fide welcome addition to the Dodgers. So, but something that just became more of the Dodgers saying, hey, maybe this is what we want, or this is something that could happen. It's now sort of becoming like, hey, this might actually happen. And we don't know. The lockout's happening right now. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who's thinking what. We don't know if there's some, under the table conversations happening between whoever it is. But at the end of the day, hey, you never know. And one thing I would expect, and one thing I do expect, is for the Dodgers to be active once the lockout's over. They do have holes on the roster as it currently sits. They do have different ways of attacking those holes, and they do have, different ways of making the team better for 2022. I do think that, it's a matter of how the Dodgers view themselves and how they want to go about it. Because if you look at the Giants as they presently stand, they did not upgrade from last year. If you look at the Padres from last year, they upgraded at the manager position, but I don't know if that's enough to overcome some of the flaws on their roster. The D-backs and Rockies probably aren't going to be good. So you're looking at, everybody in your division either staying the same or getting maybe slightly worse. And you're looking at your opportunity to get better and be better than all of them. Obviously, they've been better than every team but one team the last 9 years, and not just one team in terms of their franchise, just one specific team, which was the 2021 Giants. But I don't expect that to repeat. I do expect the Dodgers to be good again. I do expect the Giants to be good again, but I don't expect the Giants to be 107 win good. And I do expect the Dodgers to still be 100 to 102 plus wins good. So that's where it sits with all that. There's free agent wise when the lockout is over doesn't necessarily excite me too much for the Dodgers. There's different guys that we've talked about they can go out and get that would improve the team here and there. Nobody that dramatically improves the team. Carlos Rodon would be maybe the biggest guy that dramatically improves the team, but that's counting on health and counting on him repeating what he did in 2021. There's still Kelly Johnson out there, but their bullpen is pretty strong. So it wouldn't be a matter of Johnson wanting to come back on a cheaper deal, which, based on what we've heard and what it seems like he could find better deals or full-time closer roles and with other teams, which is, fine, go get your money and, go get your role. There is not too much offensively other than Carlos Correa that really excites you. We got guys like Kyle Schwarber and Anthony Rizzo and even Jock Peterson who could give you specific types of roles and could give you specific type of help in those roles, but I don't necessarily think that they upgrade the team significantly. They upgrade the team on the margins, and for a team like the Dodgers, upgrading on the margins is not a bad thing, but I do think that they're going to make at least one move that nobody was thinking about, nobody was talking about, and that ends up improving the team dramatically for 2022. This is different from my stance in previous years when the Dodgers, I thought the offseason was done, and then they ended up going to get Mookie Betts that 1 year, and they end up, changing the course of the team with that trade. So I don't think there's a franchise-altering trade that's in the works, but I do think there's a 2022 Dodgers-altering trade or trade or signing or something that's in the works that would be very great for the Dodgers. So that's what I think. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. We're free and available on all platforms and on YouTube. If you want to get a hold of us and we can talk about your comments, questions, and concerns like we did on today's episode, you can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram, Locked On Dodgers. Those DMs are open. You can also hit us up individually on Twitter. Jeff is at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. Like I said, message us on any of those. You can also send us a text or leave us a voicemail at 323-863-5625. Or you can always send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Tell your smart device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.